Okay, are we live now? We're live? Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
You're one.
Okay. Okay, everyone get your things ready for class. We had several supplies today. If you don't have all of them, don't worry about it. And tell me when it's 1 o'clock. We 1 o'clock? 1 o'clock. Welcome to art class. Today we're going to be talking all about acrylic painting. So, and really acrylic paint and what it does. When I went to college, pretty much most of my life, all I've wanted to be is an artist. And I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts in studio art, but my specialty was painting. And to tell you the truth, if I had to pick one medium and it didn't matter if I was traveling or I could go anywhere, it would be acrylic paint. I tend to have watercolor over acrylic paint because it travels everywhere I go. But I love acrylic paint. There's so many things you can do with it. And it tends to be the paint most people are familiar with. You would have seen craft paint at your stores. You might have used it in kids' projects. You might go to an art class where you would have used acrylic paint. It comes in lots of different forms, from in the tube to the craft paint, but it's pretty much always in liquid form. And so we want to play with it a little bit, and I'm going to show you some of the things that it can do. So what I need you to have before you is I'm actually going to work on a canvas today. Just a heavy paper because we are going to be building up and doing that. Watercolor paper is perfect. I paint acrylics on watercolor paper all the time. I love watercolor paper. You can also have canvas paper. If you don't know about that, you can actually buy canvas paper. It's kind of neat. And it comes in pads too. So we want that. And then you're going to want to have acrylic paints. We have ours right here. I have mine already set. And I'm just using a student grade acrylic paint. You're going to want to have brushes, obviously. And if you had your watercolor paper or some heavy paper, you can just have some scraps of that as well. A plastic knife and spoon. And if you only have one, that's fine. We can get around that. Baby powder, talcum powder, cornstarch. If in a pinch you don't have any of that, flour will work. It gets pretty gritty, and baking soda will work. It gets pretty gritty too. And then some kind of white glue. And if you said all I have is paint and canvas, well, join us anyway because we're still going to show you how that works. And of course, a jar of water, which I just realized I think I rinsed out earlier. Let me grab my jar of water. Oh, there we go. So, let's see. Acrylic paint. A little bit, when did acrylic paint come into fashion? So we did some of the earliest paint this week. We played with egg tempera, which was around in the Middle Ages. Then at the end of the Middle Ages go to about 1400s. We're in the 1200s. Oil paint. Wow! They figure out how to put that pigment into oil. Pretty cool. It becomes what everyone loves. We did Starry Night, if you remember that. That would have been oil paint. Leonardo da Vinci, he did paint in egg tempera, but also painted in oil paint. So that's really everyone who's a cool artist is walking around with their pigments in oil. All right. Then about 1900, they figure out how to put those same pigments in like a resin, an acrylic type of medium. About 1950s, which we just did the 1960s at the beginning of the week, they say, hey, we can put this on the market, and they figure out how to make it commercially, which means that you and I can go buy it at the store. So this is a pretty new medium, not even 100 years old, and people love it because it's water soluble. It's not smelly like oil paint. It's at your ready. Any age can use it, kids, adults. We're all good. We love it. And you can do lots of cool things with it. So let's find out a little bit about what we're going to do with acrylic paint. So Talia's going to come down on the table. The boys are doing schoolwork. And we're going to bring you down onto the table and onto the canvas. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw a big circle in the middle. So about that much. You want to leave room on the other side because we're going to put petals for a flower. So can you see that pencil? Is that showing up in the camera? No, you can't use a glue stick, but if you don't have glue, just watch and you'll see what happens. It's just going to help us make a glaze. So we're going to put a circle in the middle, and then we're going to put 6 petals around. We're going to make this into a big flower. So what we're going to do is kind of that big, elongated, almost like an oval shape, or a teardrop, if you will. So we're going to do 1 petal. We're going to have to fit 6 on here. It doesn't matter. And you want it to almost go to the end of your paper. Now, I almost said the word substrate, and I thought, have I used that word on these art lessons? Substrate is what you're working on. So that way I didn't have to say canvas or paper. So that's a kind of a fancy word. You can throw that around saying, oh, Mom, please move my substrate. So we're just going to turn it in, and what I'm doing is I'm moving around, and I'm just making 6 petals. So I came around to each center, and I just looped up and came back, looped up and came back. What we're going to do is we're going to use each petal to show a technique. Yep. Why don't I use a permanent marker, and then you'll see a little bit better. So what I did was I drew a center. I'll use this marker here, and then you can. That's the thing with the camera. You never know what shows up on the camera really well. So thanks for letting us know, guys. We always try to figure that out. So we've got our circle in the middle, and then we're just going to come over. I'm just going to draw a big petal, and then I'm going to repeat that so that I have 6 petals. I just come up from the circle, make a big loop around, and come back. And let's go around. See how easy it is to make a flower? You just come up, go all the way around. Your flower, they don't even have to be even. We're going to use this. This is going to be our acrylic flower power. We're going to figure out what acrylic does in each section. Thought that at least would be a fun way for us to do it. So, but you're going to want 6. We're going to work in those petals, and you want them to be pretty good size so you can play with each of the mediums. So circle in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That way we have plenty of space. So what we're going to do is I want you to pick one of the lighter colors that you have, and we're going to be doing some base coats, just because some of our techniques are going to require a color underneath. So we just want to use a light color, and it doesn't matter. I've got a light green here. Now I typically, unless when we do dry brush, you'll hear me say a dry brush, but I typically, when I'm undercoating or underpainting, I always wet my brush first. So I wet my brush, and then I take off a little. That way my fibers and my bristles are ready to move the paint. And I'm going to paint in the center, and I'm just going to paint that around. It doesn't really matter. We're going to move it around. And I'm going to add a little water just to make sure I fill that space. And all I'm doing is I'm just putting a base coat or an undercoat right now, because it's going to be what we're going to do the surface underneath. A few things. I am using a flat brush. You'll see I'm using a flat brush. My preference is for flat brushes, so you will see me use flat brushes a lot. They work really well with my hand. It doesn't mean you need to have a flat brush, but you will find as you paint more, there are certain brushes that work really, really well for you. I could do a whole art lesson just on brushes. So let's just fill in that center, and then we're going to rinse that color off. If you only have one light color, you can use the same color again. So I'm going to do that for one of my petals. And we're going to need to undercoat 3 petals. So 1, 2, 3. And the reason we're going to undercoat first is because we need it to be dry. So in painting, you're always kind of balancing your drying times, and that's true of watercolor, that's true of oil paint, and that's true of acrylic, depending on how you're going to do it. So I'm going to fill in 1 petal, Just using a light color. Again, this is an undercoat. Now I had a little water on my canvas that helps it move very easily. So we're just going to fill that in. And then we're going to, again, do an undercoat on 2 more. I have another light color, so I'm going to switch to it. Again, I wet my brush first just to help that paint move across the canvas. And I'm going to undercoat this one right here. It's okay if it's streaky right here because this is what's going underneath the painting. So we're going to make sure.
You have some takers on a possible brush glass.
You know, brushes are really funny because as with any art supply, I find it more in art supplies than some other things. You really get what you pay for. I think they say the same thing about meat, which is kind of funny. But if you're not shopping for meat at your grocery store, that won't make sense. But you really get what you pay for with art supplies. And I'm going to show you what I would use versus some of these, what we might use at home. And brushes are one of those things that, oh man, you can spend so much money on the most beautiful, glorious brushes, but you might never use them. So understanding where you would use this type of brush or where you would use that really can make a difference. And sometimes, as with all art supplies, there are some really great student grade pieces that you would include that really can do the job really, really nicely. So I need the third one filled in. So 3 petals, we're just doing an undercoat. Oops, I got a little drip on there. You know, I always tell when people are in the studio, they're always so worried about, oh no, I made a mistake. But the best thing with acrylic paint wants to be your friend. It's like a family dog. It wants to do what you tell it to. It doesn't mind if you make a little splatter, you can just paint right over it. Acrylic paint is the kindest art medium to you that anything can be. It really wants to do what you tell it to. So sometimes I say watercolor is like a cat. Sometimes it doesn't want it. It wants to be independent and live its own life. But acrylic's just like a family dog. It loves it. So right now we should have the center filled in. Didn't matter which colors. We're just choosing light colors. And we're going to let that sit up and dry. And we're going to start talking about really our techniques and what they're called and what they do. So white counts as an undercoat. That's fine. Your canvases are always white, but it's not white acrylic. It's what's called gesso. So it's also known as a ground, which sounds funny when you say a ground instead of the ground, but it's a ground because it has gypsum in it that really is added and helps it stick to your, you can kind of make a gesso. You can make lots of gessos lots of ways, but it's going to stick to your canvas and make sure that it's really adherent to the paint. So your paint's going to stick really well. So there is gesso on the canvas. So white acrylic will look a little bit different than the gesso looks. The gesso is always very flat too. Here's a great tip, guys. If you ever have this problem, so I didn't do this beforehand because I wanted to show you. I don't know if you can tell, but sometimes when you unpack the canvases, you might see that they'll have a little dent. And if I turn it around, no, you can't really tell. But they might have a little dent or surface. Can you see that on the camera, Talia? If I lower it? There's a super easy way to get rid of those. But don't do it right now because you have wet paint on your canvas. If ever you get a dent or a pull on your canvas, make sure everything is completely dry. Very, very dry. Days dry. Dry, dry, dry. Flip it over on the back. Fill a water mister, something that you have, a spray bottle with the hottest water you can get from your tap. Don't use boiling water, just use hot tap water and spray the back of your canvas all over. What that will do is, because the back of your canvas is still the canvas fabric, it will tighten those fibers in, which will then pull them tighter. So that's a great tip to have. So let's get into our techniques. I want you to move to another brush that you would have that would be dry. It hasn't been in the water yet. And if you don't have one, just try and dry off your brush best you can, if you only have one brush. And we're going to do what's called dry brush. And that's pretty much what it sounds like. Our brush is dry. We haven't wet it. There's no water on it. And we're going to stick it straight in our paint and pull. And I'm going to try and use a color I think you will be able to see. So I am just putting some on my brush, and I'm going to put it on the end, and I'm going to drag it. And do you see how we get those? See, there's where my little dent in the canvas is. You see how when you pull it, we're just dragging that paint. This is a great way to make. You might make grass, you might do all sorts of things. Don't worry if it goes outside the petal. I'll tell you an easy thing to do, how to fix that at the end of class. So you just end up pulling it. You don't put any water on your brush. This is if I had grass to do, because then I would get that striation and I would see the texture of the canvas. If you have watercolor paper, you might have less texture. If you had something that was a printage or a cartridge paper, you're going to have no texture, but you're still going to be able to see where that brush pulls. So that's our dry brush, is what we have right there. Just use a dry brush and you just pull the paint. And you don't add any more paint because you just keep pulling that paint around. And that will cover your dry brush. So now I'm going to rinse my brush out. No matter whether you have the cheapest brushes or the nicest brushes, you should always, when you're not going to be using your brush right at that moment, you should always make sure you're rinsing it out. So that's, we go around and we're always like, put your brushes in, or you at least stick it in the water. Put your brushes in the water. So now I'm going to show you a couple things. I'm going to show you stippling. This is a pretty simple technique. For this, I tend to use a round brush. Now this is called the ferrule of your brush, this metal part right here. And you see how it's round, so it makes, at the top, it makes a round brush. Here it's crimped, so it's flat. So you want a round tip. These are just, I have a nicer brush, an inexpensive brush from the kids area. Just anything that's round. And we are going to, well, I'm going to take another color, and we're going to, it can be dry or wet. We're going to literally start applying dots. We're going to stipple. Now this would have been, harken back if you know Seurat and Signac, some other French Impressionist painters and Post-Impressionists. So we're just going to make dots. Now the closer you put the dots, the more of the color you're going to see. So as the colors come away, see, as we get, you have fewer colors. So it provides that shading. Now, and I just have nice big globs of paint on there. I love that. So I'm going to start that with one color, and then I'm going to come over here, and I have a red right here. And I'm going to just, you don't have to have, these are very close colors, but I'm going to stipple right in there. They don't have to be the same. You can use contrasting colors. There is so much with...
But what would adding contrasting colors do?
Oh, well, so the whole purpose of stippling, when it was done in the post-impressionism time, was that they wanted to show how light played with color. So when they would put a contrast color, so I'll just bring one in, it really pops the others. So you can certainly do that in there. And then your eye will see different colors. Your eye will mix those colors together as they come apart. Now it's interesting, I used a red and a green because those are complementary colors. You know, I was classically trained when I did my undergraduate degree, and we had to do so much of learning how paint worked and learning about color theory that again, we could go into color theory for forever. But if you use, there's complementary colors, there are, you know, your primary and your secondary colors, then you even get into triadic and where they are all on the color wheel and what happens, and that gets super complicated and really, really cool. But the best thing to know is if you use two different colors next to each other, that what will happen is your eye will blend them and they will look different as you pull away. So red darkens green, green darkens red. That area will actually look darker when you get far away from it. So you can just stipple out from your center. Add a few more dots. It's kind of fun to do the stippling too. Can you see it well enough, T? Do I need to hold it up?
How would you say watercolor affect this brush?
Okay, you can use watercolor, but watercolor is going to react a little bit differently. You can dry brush in watercolor. You can also do the stippling in watercolor. The difference is watercolor blends. It always stays active. So when I stipple right on top and it's wet, even on dry, sometimes it will blend. Acrylic seals itself once it dries or even when it's into each other. So you notice they stay. You can still see the full circle. They're two different mediums and they work two different ways. But you can do some of these same techniques. Besides, who doesn't want to just be making little happy dots right now? That's kind of feel like Bob Ross. Happy dots, happy dots. So, okay, so you could continue to do this and fill, and I do like when I have a contrasting color in there, so I'll put some more in there. That looks always cool. Plus, I get to feel very post-impressionist right now. So, so let me just show you one other technique that we're going to take the idea of dots. So I just have a piece of heavy paper right here. This is a piece of cardstock. You could use a piece of your watercolor paper if you had a piece of cardboard sitting around. Another thing that we use, which are those hotel cards that you get. I save all the hotel cards that we go anywhere, and we use those for all sorts of scrapers in here. But let me show you this. So I'm going to take my same brush, and I'm going to put a big daub of paint right here. And I'm going to put a big daub of paint right here. Okay.
Can tempera be used for stippling?
Tempera? Can tempera paint be used for stippling? Yes, it can. It can. It's usually, it tends to be very flat and very water-based, but it's not usually as active as watercolor is. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So I put 3 big dots, but you notice I spaced them apart. And then I'm going to put, so I'm globbing some big globs of paint on here. I'll bring some more globs of paint right there. Okay. So I've got 2 colors. I'm going to add in a 3rd color just because I'm feeling frisky here, feeling like we need a little extra color.
You had a great idea.
Ooh, tell me.
From somebody using their mom's account.
Oh, a great idea from somebody using their mom's account. Okay, what did they say?
Stippling with markers.
Yes, it's a great idea to do it with markers. The difference is the markers also, if you're using water-based, markers also stay active. They're also absorbed by the paper. So that's a great way to try it. The difference with acrylic paint is it always sits on top of the acrylic paint next to it. So it's kind of neat to do that. So great idea, guys. And I love when you're sitting here and thinking about how you could use what you already have. That's fantastic. That's the way all this new art that we're sitting up here and looking at all these pictures, that's where it comes from. You thinking like that. So I've got some big globs and I've got my piece of paper. So all you're going to want to do is set your paper on the far side and we're going to pull it towards us. So I'm going to set it right there and then we're just going to pull it straight. I've got it pressed down to the canvas. And we're going to do that. So that's what it ends up looking like. Okay, guys, you could play with this for hours. It is so much fun to do. We do this a lot in our younger classes because we start art lessons at age 4 here. And really to see what happens where you get some blending if you overstroke it. But what I did to review, because you're going to want to do this one again for sure because it's so much fun. So, and you can change your patterns. We just put a big glob of paint along the way. Then we put it down and a big glob, different colors, leaving a little bit, they were touching just a little bit, but leaving some space. And then a piece of something stiffer. So cardstock, watercolor paper, cardboard, and you're going to pull it and drag it. Now, I'm going to show you this right here because I have that little bit right there. I can do it again. I'm just going to tilt my paper a little bit lower. And I'm going to pull it. Pretty cool, huh? Oh, I love that. Okay, so let's go to our next one. So I feel like I should be saying hi, but all you see are my hands. Okay, so now we're going to mix our impasto medium. So we're going to take our baby powder in our bowl right here. And we're going to put a pretty good amount of baby powder in there. I have, normally I would use a cup because I'd want to make a whole bunch, but we just need to make a little bit. So I have about a 1/4 cup here, and it's in my bowl now. Ooh, it's going to make me sneeze. And then I'm going to take, it's about 4 parts baby powder to 1/2 part glue, 1 part water. So I'm going to take just a little bit of glue, like a dab of glue. So I poured more in here than I need. What I want to do is make sure I don't need that much more baby powder. And I'm going to use my spoon here. So can you see where I've got my glue? And we basically did this when we were making our impasto medium. The difference is instead of adding any water, we're going to add paint in just a minute. And then I want you to add any color you want. I want you to add some paint. So I'm going to add this color paint. And I'm going to add about as much paint as I added glue. So you see that? I used a color so you could see it. So I added about that much glue, and I'm going to keep mixing it around, mixing that baby powder into that paint and glue. Okay? So we did this the other day. We just used water so we could get that transparent because we were using it with watercolor. Now, if I'm a little too thick, which I'm starting to get a little thick. You can use cornstarch, yes, yes. I'm getting a little too thick, so I'm going to add a little bit of water right here. Oops, I'm going to need to, my water's a little dirty, but. And then probably a little bit more paint is what I'm going to add. So let's get that moving. And this ends up becoming, depending on what you're using, you just kind of sit there and play with it a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit more water, a little bit more paint. There we go. I'm going to keep mixing it so you can see the consistency. So, normally I'm looking to see if I brought a texture paste over here. So you actually buy a medium that's called Impasto medium, and you can mix it with your acrylic paints. You can also buy something called texture paste, which I think scrapbookers use a lot. It's I don't see it quite as much in the fine art mediums, but I have seen it in others. And can you see how nice? I mean, there is so much texture here. You see how I can swirl it around and still pick it up? Here. Oh, here is, so here, you see like texture cream. I've got a big thing of texture cream. I don't know if I can get it open. T, can you open that? And then here I'll show them the impasto medium. So here's a big thing of impasto gel. So just so you know that they're actually, you don't have to always make it out of baby powder, but it's always fun to figure out how to use things you have at your house. So mine is about the consistency of toothpaste right now. So once we have it nice and thick, there's the texture cream. I'm going to show you how thick the texture cream is. Can you see that? Can you see that right there? Can you see how thick that texture cream is? That's what we're replicating right now. So I'll give that back to you. So it's about, if I had really, really thick icing toothpaste, if I poured a bunch of green toothpaste in a bowl, that's what I would end up getting. So, so how is your impasto coming? And what you're going to do is we're going to take that impasto medium, and then we're going to paint with it. Now, normally, what you can do is we could make the clear medium with white, and then we could mix it with other colors. But because we're just demoing it, and it's easier for me to show you, I want to show you how you put it on. So I am going to use, you should have some kind of plastic knife. We're going to use one end for the Scuffed Toe that we're going to do in just a minute, and then we're going to use this end as a palette knife. Now, I use real palette knives all the time, but what you're wanting for a palette knife, and if you don't know what a palette knife is, it's basically a tool that helps you spread the paint on the surface. Now, the reason I want you to use a plastic knife is, number one, we're using paint, but also you see how it's flexible? Now, don't flex it so hard it breaks, but I can literally pick up my texture medium. Oops, I've been setting my bowl in my stippling, and then I'm going to spread it just like this. So, and I'm using the end, not the end you would cut with. I'm using the other end, and I'm going to pick that up, and I'm going to spread that texture. Now, here's the neat thing: you can move into that texture, and we're going to fill that petal up if we can.
Will the impasto medium affect your brushes at all if you choose to brush in it?
Will the impasto medium affect your brushes? No, you're just going to want to rinse them very thoroughly. When you clean your brushes, you do want to use warm water, but don't use hot water. Hot water affects the glue that's in here that attaches your bristles. So you want to use warm water. Cold water won't help you as much. And then you also want to, anytime you're using acrylic paint, you want to do this. But if you have the texture medium, you want to see how I kind of push it out from the ferrule at the right here. You're going to want to make sure you get that out best you can. So, but no, it won't hurt it because it's really just paint and powder. So you want to fill in that. Now here's where you get to have fun. Remember, we had Starry Night. So, you know, he had swirls. You can make swirls and textures in here. It's so fun to paint with. We have some more questions. This is a good one to ask a lot of questions on, guys, because this is really understanding how it works. So this is, I love your creativity and where you're coming up with all those things. So can you see how it just moves around in there?
Can you go over how to make the impasto again?
Yeah, I sure can. So just while everyone's moving around, I put about, because I'm only trying to make enough impasto medium to cover this, I put about 1/4 cup of baby powder, and then I put what I would call a squeeze of glue and a squeeze of paint. I would have said maybe it was 1/2 teaspoon. And then you start mixing it. And then what you're going to have to do, you're not going to add more powder unless it gets too goopy. You're going to add a little bit of water, a little bit of paint, a little bit of glue, whatever you need. And I added all three to make sure you get this consistency. It should have a lot of resistance to you because you want to be able to get it to make peaks. You know, see how I can pull it up and it pulls the canvas and it can make peaks and spikes. And if you think of any of the Vincent van Gogh's work, that's what most people come. There's lots of artists that use it, but most people reference that. And they can see how it moves around. So that's just a lot of fun to play with. We've got that. Okay, we've got 3, well, technically 4 more. So, because I'm so used to putting things into water, I will just end up sticking my brush in that water in just a minute. So, I'm going to clean it off and just pull my handle and get that.
If you get a hole in your canvas, is there a way to fix it?
So, if you get a hole in your canvas, and it's just for you, and you're not doing a professional job that you're going to sell that canvas, what you can do is come to the back of the canvas and cut a little piece of canvas fabric and push the hole in together. I don't know what you can see on camera, but if you had a hole on the back of your canvas, let's say it was right here, I would cut a little piece of canvas fabric, and then you can glue it to the back and press it with both sides and press that in. But you repair a canvas from the back. Okay, so we've got our impasto medium. We've got our stippling and our scraping. We've got our dry brushing. So let's come around and we're going to do basically a glaze right here. That's always fun. So let's make a glaze. So we're going to need that glue again. And I said a paper plate. We use a lot of things for palettes in the studio. This is glass that has been sealed on the edges with duct tape. I love these. These are my go-to for palettes, mixing palettes all the time. But paper plates, styrofoam plates, these are wonderful too. And you can buy actual mixing palettes. We use plastic palettes, the ones that you see with the little wells in them. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix a glaze. And you can make a glaze just with paint and water. The difference is if you want it to be more transparent, you would add a medium, a gel medium. And I cannot say enough wonderful things. This is my go-to gel medium. I love golden mediums. I think they are wonderful. But we use all kinds of gel mediums in the thing. I wish Golden would hear this and just send me a lot of free stuff because it's not inexpensive, but this is wonderful. You can also use, if you want to use glue, you can use Mod Podge. And then when you buy, if you look at mediums, they'll come in all sorts of weird names like soft gel, matte, soft gel gloss, hard gel, all different things. I think I have extra heavy gel, lots of different things, and it can get super confusing, but really all gel mediums, if it says glossy, it's glossy. If it says matte, it's just not shiny. That's pretty much it. So we're going to use our school glue. So I'm going to put some glue, and I put probably about a tablespoon of glue right here. Can you see that on my plate? And then I'm going to mix less paint into this because this is acting as our clear because, white school glue dries clear. So let's add, I'm going to get a paintbrush, and so look at
things like plastic or paper be pressed onto the impasto. Would it be strong enough to hold?
Yes, if you add enough glue. The other thing is you could put a stencil down and put the impasto over and pull the stencil up, and there would be, a raised texture. If you're talking about doing some mixed media, like you want to press in, you can do that, but I would add a little extra glue to your impasto so you're getting some of that adhesion. So I've got a big glop of glue and a smaller glop of paint, and we're going to mix those together. And what we're doing is we're using the glue as what we call a medium. So acrylic paint is pigment held in an acrylic polymer, basically clear acrylic gel. And so anytime you add more of that, what happens is you make the color more transparent. So let's see what happens when we put that on top of another color. So you see how that's so transparent on top of this one when we put our glaze over? So using glazes is a wonderful way in acrylic painting that if you've done something and you didn't want it quite so bright, or you wanted it to have a really beautiful buildup on color. Let's say you were doing an underwater scene and you could build up blues and greens. Oh, it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. No, this will not hurt your brushes. Now, the glue is on there, so what you're going to want to do is immediately get it in the water when you're done with that. So, So you'll see me pop it straight in the water. Always keep your water jars handy. What you don't want to do, and I see it all the time in the studio, is see how I have paint on that brush and I lay that down? Unless I'm about to just change my water or take a drink or something like that, I don't want that sitting out. I do want it back in the, you see how I immediately stick it back in the water. So we just put the glaze, and so I put an orange over green, and you see how that changes that color. So let's try, we're going to darken our glaze a little bit, and in order to do that, I'm going to add some more paint. So I'm going to add a couple things. I'm almost trying to get equal parts now, because I'm going to do a technique called Scuffed Toe. So it's spelled really funny. It kind of reminds me of graffiti, because it looks like graffiti. But it's S-G-R-A-F-F-I-T-O, Scuffed Toe. And what it is it's a way to make designs and texture. So now I'm going to grab that plastic knife again, and we're going to use this other end. And so to get ready for this, we've added more paint to our glue, so our glaze is going to be a little less transparent. We're going to grab our knife, and we're going to go over to one of our underglazes, and we're going to paint on top. Okay, just like this. Get it all painted over our undercoat right there. Yes, ma'am. I hear questions.
Question for the artist rather than the lesson.
Ooh, a question for the artist. Okay.
Is there anything that you would not want to paint with acrylic?
Hang on just a second. Let me finish this, and then let me address that, because I want to move this when it's, and I have to think about it for a minute. So I've put that thicker glaze, and now is when I start to make designs. Is that showing up on camera, T? So what I'm doing is I'm pulling that glaze and I'm letting that undercoat show. And you can make designs any way you want. You can make patterns. And I'm using the knife. You can turn the knife where you get the serrations on the side. It's really a beautiful, I'm worried that it's not going to show up. Does that show up on camera? Mm-hmm. Isn't that cool? So you can really, and you can even use the other end, see, depending on what you use. So you can put anything in here to make that design. So you can think of all sorts of beautiful ways you can use this. You can use anything to make that texture. But what we did is, remember, you need to, your glaze is thicker, but we have a glaze so it moves around. And then what we have is all this beautiful movement and texture and design. It's called Scuffed Toe. So that gets you right there. And we've got, so let's go over what we've done so far. We've done dry brush, we've done glazing, we've done Scuffed Toe, we've done impasto, we've done stippling, we've done our drag pulling right there. And so the other thing we want to do is, of course, we want to splatter, because that's so much fun. Let me get my paint right there in the water. So to splatter, I usually tend to like to have a thicker brush. A toothbrush works awesome for this. So save your old toothbrushes if you like that. But a stiffer brush, this is the one thing that actually can hurt your brushes. And I'm going to get back to that question. I have to keep going, because I will lose my train of thought, because I start going off on rabbit trails and getting so excited. So I'm going to stick it in water before I start, and then we're going to splatter paint this right on top. So I'm going to take a color and come along, and then I am literally going to flick my brush just like this. Does that show up on camera? Number one, it's nice and messy, which is always fun. Number two, it's a great way to add some technique and design. So right there. Now, another way you can do it, but I don't recommend this at home. We do this in the studio, is you can put a lot of paint on your brush, this brush right here, and then you can tap it on something else, but it will make the paint fly across your kitchen and your couch and your floor and your moms and dads, and your kids will not be happy with me. So, but that's another great way to get a heavier splatter, is that you actually tap that brush and let that fly across from each other. So now tell me the question again, Talia. What was the question again for the artist?
Is there anything you would not want to paint with acrylic?
So anything I would not want to paint with acrylic paint, anything that had a surface acrylic paint won't stick to. So if there was something that was sealed, lots of varnishes, acrylic paint will not stick to. If it's oil paint, acrylic will not stick to. So those are things that would not work. So you need to make sure your surface is prepared for the type of paint, the medium you want to use. Then, so we'll go over, and of course you can sit there and you can splatter for days, can't you? Because that's so much fun. So we're going to go over all the things real quickly. Dry brush, glazing, Scuffed, splatter, impasto medium, stippling, drag and pull, and then of course you can just paint. You can paint details, so you can just strictly put it down, and in your center you can pull it around. Now I left my brush dry to start with so you could see when I go over, see how I'm getting that dry brush pull. I'm going to keep it dry for a minute and then I'm going to wet it. So you pull it around. Now I'm going to wet it, and you'll see the difference when you pull with a wet brush. It will move much quicker. So you can paint any kind of details you want, swirls and floop-de-floos and things like that. So we can probably go ahead and come on up, T, and get ready. And I'll tell them how to fix it in their background. So I hope you have really enjoyed learning about acrylic paint. It is such a fun medium to play with. So many things can happen with it. And you can use all these techniques in different ways, like using this for grass. I use glazing all the time in my work. I like to put in what's called underpainting, so I might paint and I use the glaze on top. The Scuffed is fun. It's just a neat way to add technique if you were making butterfly wings or fish scales. That would be so wonderful. The Splatter is always fun. That tends to be something you might want to do for skies or air or things like that, or just because it's fun. The Impasto, it's wonderful. Now, it's the kind of thing that you're going to really want to play with. And you would have to make a lot, but it's great anywhere you need to add texture or emphasis. The Stippling is really neat, especially playing with the contrasting colors like we talked about. And this just, how is that not fun all the time? So, and the dry brush is of course for grass. Now, if I wanted to keep this and keep all these wonderful things, the best thing about acrylic paint is anything you don't want, you can just paint over. So I could decide that I just want to paint around the outline of my flower and make my whole background black or brown or a solid color. And all these overstrokes, all these places where I went out, suddenly go away because they become part of the background. Or I can decide that I want to paint it over in white. And so I can make that happen. Or I can decide I want to do all sorts of textures and patterns behind. That is your choice because you're the artist. I think we had tons of great questions today, guys. There is so much because this is really, we're not really worried about making a painting. We're learning about how to paint and what paint does. And in order to really make a painting, you need to understand what's involved. So next time you pick up your brush and you start painting, you'll think, oh, I should add a glaze, or I should add more water or less water, or my goodness, where's the baby powder? I'm about to make some impasto medium. All these things can be a ton of fun. Tomorrow we're going to get back to a little bit of line drawing. We're going to antique our pages with tea bags. We're going to have a great time. Degas horse jockey is gorgeous. And I hope you join me tomorrow. Happy Thursday to everybody. And art is man's nature, nature is God's art. Goodbye, guys.